Hello, everybody. This is the second lecture on the topic of adolescence. Let me just get my screen all queued up here. In the previous lecture, I was talking about just basically we were defining what adolescence refers to. So that's the period between the onset of sexual development and about 20. Some textbooks actually take adolescent into a little bit longer. And in this chapter, or in this video lecture, I want to talk more about some of the brain development and the physical, or some of the physical and mental health associated with adolescence. Okay, so as I am sure I've mentioned before in other chapters, that the brain development develops from the back to the front. So in the back of the brain, this lizard part of the brain, this is where you have your motor function, your ability to walk, your balance, these kinds of things. It's the first part of the brain to develop. In the middle, the next region of the brain, so that's what you see here. You see it going from the back to the front. The middle, that's where you have your limbic system, your emotional, your memories, right, are all in there. And then the last part of your brain is your frontal lobe. So, you know, when you hear what folks say that teenagers are oh so moody, I like to counter with, no, that's not true, that teenagers are really no more moody. I mean, they may have some hormonal fluctuations just like the rest of us do, but what we're probably observing is the emotional reaction that is not as controlled by the frontal lobe. So where your limbic system, that middle part of the brain to develop, that's the part where all your emotions are effectively being created. It's this frontal lobe that is implicated in the control of the emotional expression of that behavioral component. So teenagers really aren't any more moody than anyone else. What they have less of is the executive control over their emotional expression. So they become very athletic, right? They're the most athletic, then their emotional center is very active, but only later in life does that frontal part. And if you remember from a previous lecture, maybe from a previous chapter, when is the brain fully formed? And that's not till your mid-20s. So that's not till the next chapter, which is early adulthood, when that finally gets formed. Okay, so that's really what's going on here, what all these images are about. This slide just includes some of the other physical and mental health phenomena associated with adolescence. One thing is that adolescents need more sleep than other stages of life. Probably some argue that its infancy needs the most sleep, followed by adolescence. But unfortunately, this is the time where our culture has also made our lives very, very busy, right? High schoolers are going to school probably before elementary school kids are. They've got athletics after school, then maybe they have a social life, and their brains are naturally programmed for them to stay up later into the night and to sleep later in the day. But our culture has just exactly the opposite, that where often it's the high schoolers that start before the elementary school kids, even though naturally the high schoolers are sleeping later. So it's kind of rigged against the adolescent to get enough rest. Unfortunately, this is also a period of some rapid body image changes for boys, because boys often see an improvement in their body image and girls see a decline in their body image. And some have argued, some feminists and sociologists have argued, that this is associated with the sexual and the sexual onset of women's bodies, that as they grow into what they're supposed to do, that they're supposed to be bleeding on a regular basis and creating life and all of these things, that there's this cultural distaste for the natural development of the female body. And observers point to things like the emphasis on, say, in the porn industry, the barely legal, how in some sexual ways we I don't say we, I'm at a loss for words here, but the popularity of barely legal or underage girls for sex. They argue that this suggests that our culture prefers the youthful, almost childlike image of a female as opposed to the fully mature, grown-up version of a female. I hope that makes some sense. Hope you get what I'm putting down. Anorexia and bulimia, it's important that you keep these two straight. Anorexia is effectively when an individual refuses to maintain a normal body weight. People are more likely to die from anorexia nervosa than bulimia nervosa. Bulimia is the binge and purge. Somebody who's bulimic will have a normal body weight, a normal body weight, and they may eat large quantities of food, and then they will purge it, they'll throw it up. The people with bulimia may suffer from like cancer of the esophagus, their teeth may rot out from all of that stomach acid. But an anorexic, their organs literally begin to shut down because they starve themselves, right? So that's it's also a phenomena that we don't see either of these conditions in lesser developed or really poor countries. These are phenomena of affluence, that they only happen where there's rich people. Because only in rich countries is there enough food for people to choose not to eat it, so to speak. Now, what are some of the other things on this? I want to draw your attention down here to the causes of death. This changes. One of the textbooks that I was using not very long ago had suicide as the third leading cause of death. Your current textbook, this one that I'm using right now, which is the orange one, has this fourth leading cause of death. But I think more important than that is car accidents. That's the number one thing that's likely to kill someone between the ages of 12 and 20. But this speaks to, that opportunities and risk kind of thing, that we get behind a wheel, we're 17 and we feel like we know what we're doing, but we really haven't been driving all of that long. We become better drivers with more practice. And I think that then you got some other statistics on here about the percentage of people who use drugs and alcohol. What are some of the predictors? Maybe ironically that this drug use is not more common amongst poor kids. It's actually more common amongst not poor kids that have a little bit of money, a little bit of time and access. So really middle class or rich kids are as likely, if not more likely, to be using drugs and things like this. Okay, I think this is where I'm going to stop. And when I come back on the next video lecture, I will talk about sexuality and sexually transmitted infections.